Today we're going to go over two things, and maybe start a third, depending on how the time goes. One of them is enumerations. So enumerations are used when there's a limited number of values that a variable can take. For example, we had, with our pizza example, we had only a few allowable values for the crust, only a few allowable values for the size, and so on. And we put exception processing, and that does a lot to help for preventing invalid fields to be in there. So that's one thing that we can do, is we can trap exceptions. But really, trapping exceptions is only like the tip of the iceberg. We can actually do better. It would be better if we could say, hey, these are the only values that this particular property can take. All right. Almost like we're creating our own data type. All right. And that's what enumeration is. So if we look at this, I have inside the pizza class I have defined an enumeration called pizza size. What does that enumeration mean? It means that it can only have one of these three values. And these are like constants: small, medium, and large. Probably what it does for enumerations is it probably stores them as an integer, like maybe this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, but we don't need to worry about internally how that's implemented. All we have to do is we have to define which of our fields uses that enumeration. So I changed, and I think this is pre-exception, so I don't have the exception code in here, but for our arg size and the size of the pizza, I don't have it displayed as being a string. I have it displayed as being if it's small, medium, or large. So it's accepting an argument of type pizza size. So I can use this in place of the standard types that I would use, like a string or integer or Boolean or something like that. And these are the only allowable values for it. All right. I put that in the constructor, both constructors, and I put that in the set size. And the get size returns one of those as well. All right. So let's go and let's see the implication of this. We've defined the enumeration. We've set our variable type to be of that enumeration. We've set the arguments in all the relevant functions and return values in the relevant functions. And let's see again how that is used. And we're going to test in the unit test class. It's like a static variable because when I create a new pizza, I say pizza.pizza sizes. Pizza is the name of the class in which the enumerable is defined in. Pizza size is the name of the enumerable, and .large is the type of value, is one of the values. And I do this here for medium and so on. Pardon me? Isn't what a private attribute? The pizza size is a private attribute. Private, well, I didn't make it private, but I could. Yes. There's two different things going on here, though. Two different things. Actually, this should be size. Oh, no, it is. I'm getting confused. The attribute is named size. The enumerable is named pizza size. So that we can access. We're not accessing the pizza size. We're not accessing the size of the actual pizza. We're accessing the enumerable. So that we are allowed to access. Okay. And we define this as having a type of pizza size, but the name of the attribute is actually size. We use that then in here if size equals pizza size dot small, then we calculate that, pizza size dot medium, pizza size dot large. Okay. So what happens if we output the value of the size? Let's see what we get. Sure we saved everything. Okay, here are where my classes are. And make this bigger. Pizza size is, and it gives a value of the enumeration. So the pizza that was set as having large gives you the value of large. Now, what happens if you had a user interface here? So if we had a user interface that had radio buttons or something like that. So let's pull down the radio button example. I'm not going to do the whole code, but we'll look at it and discuss how you would handle it. Let's go and edit this. Actually, I'm going to put it in the same folder as the pizza example so it can access those classes. Do that. If I wanted to use this use the code to do the radio button, what I would have to do is something like this. I add the radio buttons. The first button is the first button is selected. I am setting 1. If the second button is selected, I'm setting 2. If the third button is selected, I'm setting 3. What I would do instead is I would do something like this. I would say if the button is set to 1, then pizza size dot small. Or if I was using that to call another function, I would use that as the argument. So what this would do is this would translate what radio's button was clicked to the proper value of the enumerable. I'm going to get rid of this little piece of code for results 2 because that's not really relevant here. Oh. Oh, pizza size can't be converted to a string. It's expecting a string in here. Let's change that to string. Pardon me? An enumerable is not enumeration rather is not a class. So I don't think that's a good question. We'll look at that in a second, but I think the answer is no. I do believe we can call a toString method on it though. Maybe it's a special kind of object. Let's see if this compiles and runs before I make some assertions. Okay, it compiled. Oh, RB with a capital letter. If I click this, it tells me small. So toString does work. So let's see if we can get more details to answer the question of what exactly is an enum. Enum is a special data type. Variable must be equal to one of the values. Fixed set of constants. The enum declaration defines a class called an enum type. So we actually could do something with that. Yeah, right. The enum class body contain that. We can also loop through this. So let's Let's go and let's change our unit test. I'm going to show you something that's really cool. Instead of hard coding in those radio buttons, I want RB test. Where is that? That is here. Just like an array, right? Let's just write. First, we're going to write P to string. So I'm just going to output the type of the size. So we should get 3 of those things printed out to the console. Shows small, medium, and large. Okay, so loop through. Notice that even in a GUI application, you can still write to this, and this is useful in debugging, like if something isn't happening the way you want it to. But let's go and do this now. That's nice that we can get a list of them. But let's go, and instead of just getting a list of them, let's make a new radio button. Instead of defining my 3 hard-coded radio buttons, let's each time through the loop, I'll create a new radio button. RB or radio button. RB equals new radio button. And we're going to take the value of p.toString and use that to set the value of the drop down, or not the drop down, the radio button. And then we're going to add to the button group that radio button. So we didn't hard code the values in. If someone were to add a new size of pizza, we would automatically get that the next time this ran. The next time it was compiled and ran. So let's save. Oops. Yeah, I deleted the different RB. So we probably want to go back to what it was originally. to pull the name. So we're going to pull this code to loop through the buttons and see which one is selected, as opposed to looking at the hard-coded values, the brute force way. So this probably should work. See if the compiler gives us a better error. Reach the end of file while parsing. Okay, it's expecting another curly bracket. Oh, because we added a function down here. So this goes with that. This goes with the one up there, so that should be correct. Or not. Oh. Forgot I had to do this too. Radio button RB equals new radio button. J radio button. See, that's the time like when you're writing this stuff, it's like it knows I meant J radio button. Come on. Right. Exactly. Okay, there we go. Finally. And we have our 3 buttons that are labeled that, and that. We click this, we get the value. Or we could, yeah, we get the value. All right. So enumerables are good. You should think of using those going forward on anything you do. Like, for example, I think you have a bank account assignment that's due next week. On a bank account, you have to be able to choose between, is it a deposit, a withdrawal, or an adjustment? That'd be a perfect place to have an enumerator. And again, the sort of advanced version of that is not just use the enumerator in the class, but use it in generating the GUI to make sure that, you know, if that is updated, then everything's taken care of. Okay, now we're going to talk about an IDE for Java. Now, you might wonder, gee, why is he talking about an IDE for Java at this point in the game? And maybe I should have gave this lecture at the beginning of class because we didn't use it for so much. I do think software developers now tend to rely on IDEs a little too much. All right. It's like if you were teaching someone mathematics, if you teach them how to add, multiply, subtract, and divide, you wouldn't give them a calculator when they were learning it. You'd make sure that they learned the fundamentals so that they could do it themselves. And then once they have proved that they have that down, then give them a calculator because it saves them time. I sort of think about the same way between programming students and IDEs. So I start out with just going over just a basic file editor. Hey, previous to this semester, we used Notepad++, so we made an improvement in using Visual Studio Code in that regard. But now that we're somewhat comfortable creating Java applications and so on, we can look at possibly doing better and doing some things that can take care of some other stuff for us. So we're going to do that by using an IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. So the one we're going to use is Netbeans. And it's installed on this machine. There is a version 13 up now, which I just installed and was playing around with a little bit. And if you go to create a project, you have a choice of a whole bunch of things. You can create a web application. You can create JavaFX. JavaFX is a different way to do user interfaces other than Java Swing, which we've been using. You can create Netbean modules. What's a bean? We'll talk about that at some point, not today, but we'll talk about that. You can even create PHP, HTML5 JavaScript. There's samples of things. Maven, Gradle, and Ant are ways to sort of keep your project organized and compile and build your application. So we're going to go under Java with Maven, and we're going to pick Java application. A simple Java SE application using Maven. You're recommended to begin here if you're new to Java. So we'll pick that. It asks us for the name of our project and the location of it. All right, I'm going to call this enum in Netbeans. You can choose where to put it. It wants to put it in your documents folder. I'm going to put it on the desktop just so we can find it easier. It then asks for an ID, a group ID. And they use what's called a reverse URL. All right. And they use a reverse URL for the package too. All right. So let's talk about reverse URLs and packages. All right. Packages are chunks of code, a collection of Java classes that you're going to treat as a unit. So for example, if we are a school, all right, and we had stuff related to the faculty, all right, maybe the library doesn't need stuff related to the faculty, all right, but things like scheduling classes and payroll and all that needs stuff related to the faculty. You can then pick and include which packages you need. So you divide sort of your application, your large application, into a number of packages, and then you can deploy the packages as needed to other applications that need to access the code in those packages. Our projects are pretty small, so we're going to have just one package, all right? And the package uses a reverse URL format. Why is that? Well, it's possible to have two things, two classes in your application that have the same name, all right? Especially if you use third-party applications and bring things in. You have no control over what they name their stuff, right? If it's just your stuff, you can sort of be careful with the naming and all that. So for example, the example I like to give is, let's say you're a furniture manufacturer, and you have a class for your custom built tables. So your class is called table. Let's say you use a database package that integrates with a certain kind of database, and it has an object name or a class name table. How do you differentiate between the two? You differentiate between the two by giving the package name. So if I wanted to use the database version, this is the kind of table with 4 legs. This is the kind of table that's in a database. If I wanted the database one, I'd have the DB package name .table. All right. If I wanted the 4 legs one, I would have the furniture package name. Table. So I would, at the beginning of my code, I would import, let's say I had a program that used one of them, then I had a program that used the other one. If I was only using the database table version, I'd import this. I'd import the package table. And then anywhere in my code that I said it would be using the database version. Likewise, if I wanted to use the furniture version, I would just import that class. And then this would be the furniture version. Now, let's say I want to use both of them. What I would do then is I would never refer to it just as table. I would put the package name in front of it. Something like that. You would fully qualify it. Think of the package as sort of being like the last name of the class. You know, this is assuming that that no one has the same first name and last name. But if you just say table, this tells it, hey, when I'm talking about tables, I'm talking about the one in the DB package. This one says, hey, if I'm talking about tables, I'm talking about the one in the furniture. If I use this explicitly says without any imports, give me the table class that's in the furniture package. And then later on, I could have the same thing that referred to the database package. And I could mix and match within my program. All right. So I wouldn't import either of them, and I would just explicitly spell out the full name of the class, including the package name. Okay, now this all falls apart if these aren't unique. So let's say, for example, that it's Zeller's Furniture Company, and Zeller's also has a database consulting company. So both the database company and the furniture company named their package Zeller's, Well, we're back to square one. Because we still wouldn't be able to differentiate between the two. And it'd be just like having the same name. So what do? We have to guarantee that every sort of project, every package has a unique name. So what in the world of computers is unique? The URL is unique. All right. So in other words, there is no one in the world other than community college that has this as a URL. All right. So if there was Zeller's database, they probably have a URL. If there was Zeller's furniture, they would have a URL. And here's the funny thing. When you use these for package names, it doesn't really matter if they actually have that URL or not, as long as it's unique. All right. It's not like it runs out to that website and does some checking. All right. It's just a naming convention that guarantees it being unique. But again, most organizations, pardon me, it would work even if the URL wasn't used, as long as you didn't try to use a package from someone else that used a URL. And that is getting kind of unlikely. But again, since most organizations would have some URL associated with them, it's pretty safe that they're going to use their real URL. So what do? You flip the URL around. So instead of Zellers.com, we would say Zellers.com, ZellersDB. Now, ZellersDB might have a couple of different projects going on at the same time. All right. There may be the base code, and there might be a variety of subsystems that can get added on. So you say finer level of detail. If you want to, then you could put all the GUIs in one place. You can take it down as finely as you need to sort of package these things. And remember, the purpose of packaging is if some other application needs to use those classes, you can give them that package and they can reference that package. All right. So for these examples, I'd encourage you to do this. I'm going to use LC as the domain, the reverse domain. So LC, LorraineCCC.edu. I'm going to put my name. No other Zellers here. If I wanted to be extra careful, I might put a first name or first name and middle initial, whatever. But we can pretty safely bet there's only one Zellers here. And then I put the name of the project. All right, enum and Netbeans. Okay, so back here, when we get prompted for the group ID, I'm going to put edu dot LorraineCCC dot Zellers. And then it assumes the package is edu LorraineCCC Zellers enum in Netbeans. So I create that, and I have an empty package. All right. These things are going to get filled in later. Some of them will, anyhow. That's the version of Java I'm using. So this depends on the JDK 1.8 being available. Here's some project files. And here's where my code is. I have underneath my source packages, I have my source package. But right now, there's nothing in there. If we were literally creating from scratch, we would go File, New File, pick a Java class, work through the wizard and create the new class. But it's not that hard to do. I'm sure you can pick that up. I'm going to go and I'm going to import a class or import some classes from the stuff that I already did. So I'm going to take my enumerable example, and I'm going to copy these classes into my project file, which I put on the desktop, and I called it enum in beans. Where does it go? It goes in my source folder, main, Java, edu, Lorraine CCC, Zellers, enum in Netbeans. So each of those things, each of those dots on the package becomes a subfolder within the project structure. So I'm going to paste these there. All right. Go back to Netbeans. Like magic, they're there now. All right. And I could run this. Run this just by clicking the little arrow. It wants to know what main class I want to use, because this application has two files that have a main class in it. It has unit test and it has RB test. Let's bring up RB test. So I'll select that one, and I can remember it permanently. All right. Or just for the current IDE session. I select main class. I'm off to the races. It does its thing. It downloads some stuff that it needs. And there is my GUI that is working like it did before. Okay. So no more going to the command line and forgetting how to spell Java C or not putting the right name in or whatever. All right. Now let's go out there and let's see what we get here. In our folder, we have our source and we have our target. The target is the compiled code. And we have classes, and these are the compiled version of those classes. So that's where it puts the compiled version. Generated sources, it doesn't have any in this case. I'm not sure what those are used for. Maven status, the Maven compiler plugin, and other things. All right. So what other things could we do with this? Well, one nice thing that we can do with this is we can, where is it? Format our code. In other words, I tell all of you to like make sure stuff's indented properly and so on. If you go under source format, it follows Java conventions and formats things nice and clean for you. So if you did happen to put something over here by mistake, if I go up here, format it, select, I guess. And it lines it back up where it should be. All right, so that's kind of cool. Other things that I can do, generate, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. I'd have been wondering why I didn't compile about 5 minutes from now. Other things that we can do, we can generate JavaDoc. What is JavaDoc? JavaDoc is a set of web pages that look like the official Java documentation. So like, for example, if I Google Java local date, this local date, this is like the Bible as far as like what is going on with this, because it shows you the fields that are available, the method summary. Might not be very useful in telling you how to do something, but it gives you complete details about what is in the class. Well, we want to do that to our application. So we go and generate that. That will put out there in Target, Java doc. Okay, that is different than I've seen before. It used to give you HTML pages. Now it gives you an XML file. Doesn't have much in it. Let me look to see if it is somewhere else. There we go. Just looking in the wrong place. Index. Show me all the classes that exist. Order. And this is nice professional documentation without having to do much of anything. Now, if you really get good at this, you can actually put comments in your code as signals to JavaDoc to include these, separate lines of text and so on. When we go to pizza test, it will show us. All methods, instance methods, and any static methods, or concrete methods as opposed to abstract. Trying to see where it put, did it create any documentation for pizza size? It didn't look like it did, which I'm kind of surprised about. But you know, what do you want for nothing? If you really want to, you could go in and edit this. This just gives you a basic start of this. RB test, and so on. The other thing it does is it builds for us a jar file. A jar file is one way of deploying our application. By deploying the application, I mean, how do you get it from your machine to the rest of the world? All right, you write this great application. I think I don't have the settings right to create the jar. Yeah. Try real quick to do that. If not, we'll leave that till next week. All right, I do not see, I thought that was on this option. I might be mistaken. So I don't see it there. At any rate, there's a setting that you can set to, oh, packaging jar. I don't know why it didn't create a jar. Let's see. Oh, build project or clean and build. I thought every time you ran it, it built it, but maybe not. Let's go and build this project. Clean and build is kind of a reset. Like if things start acting weird, you do a clean and build. Like if I'm getting a weird error that I don't understand, that's the first thing I'll do. And it takes care of it so many times, you know, because you can notice with this, even with a small project like this, all these files that get generated and stuff can be really, really a headache. But let's see. There's our jar. So I'm going to put that jar on the desktop. Let's imagine the desktop is another machine that has a Java runtime engine only. Doesn't have to have the Java development kit. So this is any old person that has Java runtime installed, which again is a smaller install. Can run this. And you could create a script for them to do it so they wouldn't have to do it through the command line. By typing java dot jar enum in NetBeans. Not jar. Okay, there's something I needed to set up that I didn't. But again, the idea is with that jar file, you can give it to someone else and they can run it without having to have the full Java development platform. All right, that's all I had for today. If there are any questions, please let me know.